Hello, and welcome to the Music Survival Guide, the independent musician's guide on how to survive in the music industry. My name's Phil, a mixing and mastering engineer. Hello to you out there in podcast land. I hope you're doing well and dandy. Dandy's not really a word that's used anymore, is it? Anyway, I hope you're good. So this week on the podcast, I'm chatting with Tom, who is the bassist of a band called Tailgunner. Tailgunner have kind of just seemingly come out of absolutely nowhere obscurity to do essentially sell-out tours across the UK, and they're starting to do some shows into Europe. And watching their rise kind of from the start in a very short space of time is really impressive to watch. So this is quite an episode, quite a listen, I've got to say. So we discuss things like finding the right band members to get started, how the band seemingly kind of came from nowhere to being big quite quickly, and the unusual way that they recorded the debut album. Now, it's worth saying, unfortunately, there were a few technical issues in the recording software that I use, capturing Tom's end, so it gets a little bit crackly at some points, and I've tried to kind of make that the best I could, but there's no way getting around the kind of way it was recorded, unfortunately. So it's not as good as it could be. I'm really sorry, Tom, but it was such a good conversation that I just thought you have to listen to it anyway. So I'm just going to say, on with the interview. So today on the podcast, I am joined by Tom of Tailgunner. So my first question, as always, is from an online random question generator. And the question this week is quite an interesting one. If you inherited or won £1 million, what's the very first thing that you would do with the money?
I'm trying to find an answer that's not incriminating. I think I would probably give some money to like friends and family and stuff that, you know, that needed it, or could maybe find a better use for it than I could off the top of my head. I've been looking at the new Fender Aerodyne range. They've just put out some really nice basses, so that springs to mind, you know. And some trainers that aren't falling apart, because I've been wearing these on stage now for the last year or so, and they are absolutely decimated.
My trainers last no time at all, so I'm with you there. I've not actually tried the new Aerodynes, just to go nerdy for a minute, because I'm actually a bassist in my somewhat spare time. I'd love to try one sometime.
I was going to say I play the bass I have is the 2004 Japanese Aerodyne, so from the original run, and it's really sad to see that that's now been discontinued, but the new range that they've put out are absolutely gorgeous. And there's a white P bass version, and I never thought I'd see Fender do a P bass Aerodyne. But yeah, it's like a white P bass shape, and it's got like a black trim around the edge of the body and stuff. It's absolutely beautiful. It's one of those basses where it's like I would buy it without even playing it, you know. I trust that it's going to be fantastic.
A beautiful instrument, if nothing else. So, on to more, I was going to say more relevant matters. I guess talking about basses is relevant, but how did you get into music in the first place? What was your route into this crazy world?
The first time I can remember ever having like enjoyment of music or music making an impression on me was when I was on holiday. I was about 3 years old, and someone in my family bought me, I guess it was like ABBA's Greatest Hits on cassette. And yeah, like even back then, being a toddler, I just remembered like really, really obsessing over. I didn't know it was ABBA. I didn't know, you know, what it was, but just being obsessed over it. And music didn't really have an impact on me then. Growing up for quite a while, like to be honest, it's not something I really cared about when I was a kid. I was more into like football and things. Up until the point where I saw the film School of Rock. It was on, you know, the last day of term in year 6, which is like, you know, the tradition where the teacher can't be asked to do any work, so they just put on a film. And even seeing it then, it didn't really have an impression on me. But what happened was I got the riff to Smoke on the Water stuck in my head when they play it in the scene in the film, and I didn't know that it was the riff to Smoke on the Water. You know, I just had the riff stuck in my head. And I got home from school that day singing that riff, and my dad went, "Oh, why are you singing the riff to Smoke on the Water?" He's like, "If you like that, check this out." And he sat me down with the Back in Black album, and the moment that Brian starts singing on that record, but I describe it as like the Wizard of Oz moment where my life went from black and white into colour. And I mean, literally from that moment then and there, I'm still the same person now as I became when I heard AC/DC for the first time. And then that night I heard Guns N' Roses, the Sex Pistols, Iron Maiden, so many great bands for the first time. This is like 10, 11 years old, and I'll never look back.
That's a great route in. I'd be amazed if there weren't loads and loads and loads of people who've found their way into music via the School of Rock film. Surely you're one of many in that regard. Nice. So what made you go from there to picking up an instrument?
I saw Billy Duffy on the cover of the Sonic Temple album. And obviously he's a guitar player, but he's in this epic pose on the front cover of that album. And I just thought that's the coolest thing I've ever seen, you know. So I naturally wanted to be a guitar player. And then I met my friend, who I'm still friends with to this day, in school. We got chatting and basically said, I'm putting a band together. We really need a bass player. And I said, I can't help you because I'm going to be a guitar player. And then I thought about it for like half a day. And I went, okay, you know what, whatever, I'll be a bass player, because to me, the vehicle was less important than actually being in a band. I just really wanted to be in a band. So I joined a band before I owned a bass. And then the first gig we did, I mean, I think I'd literally been playing bass for like 2 or 3 days. I couldn't even tune it, but we went to this like local pub. There's like a jam night, and we did Paranoid and Highway to Hell. So I was thrown in relatively at the deep end straight away.
I mean, I've got to say, actually, in the time I've been doing this podcast, I've never heard anyone reference Sonic Temple album. And I think the album is so good, and it somehow flies under the radar for so many people. I don't get it. I really don't.
It's a great album, like New York City and like Medicine Train and stuff. It's killer.
Love it. So you're in this band. You've been playing bass for not very long at all. How did you get from there to Tailgunner?
Over many years. I mean, I stayed in that band. I mean, the thing is, really from when I joined and getting into rock and roll and heavy metal and stuff, because like I say, it was straight away AC/DC and Guns, Maiden, and all of those sorts of bands. I was never into what was popular in the rock scene at the time, which would have been like the emo stuff, you know. So I was straight away into the same sort of stuff that I am now. And very, very quickly, I mean, really in the space of a month or two, I realised that, okay, this is exactly what I want to do for the rest of my life, you know, and got very serious, even being like 12 years old, you know. Saw Iron Maiden that summer. They were my first ever show. And seeing them really cemented, like, okay, you know, that's what I'm going to do, you know. And yeah, so I stayed in that band that I was in school for about 5 years as I grew up, you know, up until about 17. And I was, like I say, I was very serious very fast. I think it took the others aback, and we had some lineup changes and had to fire some people, and, you know. And then I left that band when I was 17 because we went up to London to record a single. This is at the same studio that a band back in the day called The Howling used. The Howling had the Rev, who was in Towers of London, and the Prodigy on guitar. And growing up, Towers of London were like, you know, I loved their debut album and stuff. So working with him, and he came to check us out at a show that we had in London, because they had a showcase for Red Bull Records and they needed an opening band. So he heard our single in the studio and he's like, I want to come see you live and maybe we can get you on this thing. And, you know, when you're 17, like, that's absolutely massive. And he came to see us and we sucked. Like, we sucked so bad, you know? But it was great because it was a real eye-opener of, like, I'm really a long way off where I actually want to be. And I kind of realised that the rest of the guys in that band, although they were my friends, they weren't taking it as seriously as I was, and it was never going to happen with that, you know. And then I put together another band a few years later, and did something completely different. It was like kind of 80s post-punk, new romantic, gothy stuff. Just because I think I naively thought at that age that I kind of exhausted everything that I wanted to do in rock music, because my only experience was with very, very local musicians that weren't taking things seriously. And I thought, you know what, I'll try something totally different. That band did relatively well. We got signed and then dropped and bits and pieces, and it all fell apart in the end. But that really, really taught me a lot. And then once I left that band, this is in summer of 2018, I basically said to myself, if I'm going to do this again, if I'm going to go through the effort to start another band, it has to be exactly the band that I've always had in my head since I was a kid, you know? Just, by that I mean like the ultimate heavy metal band, no apologise, no compromising, just 100% balls to the wall, you know? And I took a couple of years out to learn as much as I could and to find the rest of the band.
So how did you find them? Where did they appear from?
Through a lot of effort over a long period of time. I tried everything, you know, it was Facebook and Instagram, and even, you know, the old school stuff of putting posters up in guitar shops and in metal bars and everything really. And I mean, Zach, he joined the band because a friend of his had seen that I was looking for band members, and his band at the time, their bass player had just quit, so they needed a bass player. And he put us, the two of us, in touch, and Zach said to me, do you want to join my band? And I said, no, but do you want to join my band? And he said no, but I'll play on a demo for you. I was like, okay, because I'd written this song, which was Guns for Hire, and I said, I need to get a demo together at least, even if these people aren't going to join the band, so I can go and show it to people and say, this is what I want to do, you know. So Zach played on that demo, and then I found Craig, our singer, because his last band followed me on Instagram, and I checked them out. I thought, that guy looks really cool. I wonder who he is. And then clicked through, and he had a YouTube covers channel. So I had a look on that, and he had a cover of 22 Acacia Avenue by Iron Maiden. And as soon as it kicks into the high part, I was like, oh my God, that's our singer. You know, that guy's our singer. And I called my girlfriend and said, I found the singer for the band. And she was like, oh, it says here that he's already in a band. I was like, yeah, don't worry about that. Like, he'll be our singer. So I got talking.
A lot of confidence.
Yeah, I got talking to Craig. Well, it's like I just heard his voice, and I was like, I don't care what happens. That guy has to sing for this band, you know? And then same thing again. He was like, I'm too busy with my own band, but I'll sing on the demo for you, you know? So I had a demo of Guns for Hire with the program drums, me on bass, Craig on vocals, and Zach on guitar. And then once Craig did the vocals for that, I sent it through to Zach, and he went, okay, you know what? Yeah, I'll join your band. This sounds awesome. So then we had Zach, and then I travelled. I was living in Portsmouth at the time, on the south coast, and I travelled up to Liverpool where Craig had a show. And I turned up at the venue, and basically made him jump a little bit, because I was like, hey man, I come to see you. And he's like, you live on the other side of the country. I was like, yeah, I know, right? But like, you know, I think it was at that moment that he realized like how serious I was. And I spoke to him there, and I was like, so you know, you got to join this band. And he's like, oh, I'm too busy, man. I'm too busy. I'm like, okay, think about it, you know? And then it took probably another 6 months or so of kind of speaking to Craig and sending him more demos. And I think he realized, like, okay, there's really something going on here, you know? And so he joined the band, and yeah, a couple of lineup changes over the last year or so. And we're the five of us that we are today.
Wow. So the moral of the story is, if you really want someone to join your band, make sure they're on your demo, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, like I've heard before with people, and it's so true, is that no one is going to care as much about your band as you do, you know? And it's like, and no one's going to believe in you as much as you do. So you have to really, really show people, even if that's potential band members in the early days, like, look, this is something really real. And that was the thing, like with the rest of the guys, and especially with Craig, was like, I know you're busy, but if you join this band, we'll go further than anything any of us have done before, you know? And I think it was really worth it. And I would say to people as well that are trying to put something together, the likelihood is the people that you'll end up getting are people that you already are aware of. You just kind of have to play the waiting game sometimes.
That's very true. That is very true. I mean, the other thing that you're not maybe emphasizing so much, and I get it, I kind of know why you talk about it this way, is your, like, confidence is quite an infectious thing. So if you really want to start a band, as it were, then having confidence in what you're doing is a really great starting point for kind of drawing people in and going, no, this is really worth considering.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you have to believe in yourself, otherwise, you know, no one else will. But I think for me, it was, like I say, just starting to write the songs that would form the first album and showing them to the others, and then them really recognizing that, okay, like something is happening here and I want to be a part of it.
Listen, it's really good. It's really good. Basically.
Yeah.
Makes sense. So where did the band name come from? My Iron Maiden sense is tingling, because I know a lot of Iron Maiden. I'm not ashamed to say. And I know there is a song called Tailgunner, but is that where it comes from, or is it somewhere else that you...
Yeah, pretty much, man, pretty much. I mean, in the lockdown, we were desperately looking for a band name, and I would literally spend like an hour or two every morning reading these massive hardback copies of the dictionary and thesaurus, just scrolling through trying to find a band name whilst listening to records, and I ended up with a list of about 100 potential names, and probably 90% of them were taken, and like the other 10, like, we couldn't get everyone to agree on. And I think that's the thing with a band name, is everyone has to believe in it, because if you're going to go out there and stand in front of that backdrop or whatever every single night, you have to really believe in the name. And basically, we were getting towards the end of 2020, and we had the recording for the debut album coming up. And I said to the others, like, you know what? I don't want to go and make the album unless we have a band name. So I'm going to find something over the next like few weeks. And I did the cheesy classic thing of looking at song names. I had a huge metal playlist on Spotify, and Tailgunner by Iron Maiden was in there, and it just jumped out at me, and I was like, do you know what? Tailgunner, I think that's a cool name. And then I asked a few friends and a few people, I said, what do you think of this name, Tailgunner? And everyone went, yeah, do you know what? That sounds killer. And I think it's always the way with band names, is at first they all sound weird. All band names are a little bit naff until the band is a thing, and then they're cool, you know?
Like, I've heard about the famous story that I've heard always is John Paul Jones of Led Zeppelin, and he kind of was like, I'm in this new band, and they were like, oh, what's it called? He said Led Zeppelin. He was like, they were like, that's a really terrible name. So, which objectively, when you think about it, it's a weird name. So it's just the way these things go, isn't it?
That's the thing with most band names. I mean, it's like the Beatles. That's a rubbish name, you know, with the beat pun and everything. And most band names are a little bit crap, but they're not, because they're that band, you know.
Exactly so. Nice. I mean, I've got to say, that's another relatively lesser known song that you brought up there in Tailgunner. It's a good song. I love Tailgunner, but it's not the most well-known song, which is, you know, part of the reason why it's good for a band name, I guess. But
yeah, I mean, that's it. There's two sides of it. Whereas you can't call a band Run to the Hills or
then
something.
you're an Iron Maiden tribute.
But also, Yeah, exactly. Yeah, unless you're an Iron Maiden tribute. And the other side of it is that people that do know that song goes, oh, that's, that is cool points.
It's very true. Very true. So what was your first gig like as a band? In 2021, I'm going to say?
2022. So we spent a couple of years getting everything ready. We recorded the whole album and shot all the videos and all the rest of it. The first gig was great. I mean, we took the gamble and booked a small tour before the band launched, and just gambled on the fact that the first couple of singles would be really popular. And luckily for us, we put out Guns for Hire and it exploded straight away. So we did 5 shows. We played Nottingham, Reading, Liverpool, London, and Portsmouth. This is like about 10 weeks after the band first went public and everything. And then 2 of those shows, Liverpool and London, both sold out, which was, absolutely ridiculous for being that new. The first show was in Nottingham. And that was a killer show. I mean, I look back now, I was actually watching bits of it the other day, and I think we seem so amateurish, but all of the pieces were already there. We already dressed the way that we do, and we already played like insanely fast and all the rest of it. So yeah, it was a killer show, to be fair. And like I say, being on tour straight away, and we were never a local band. So that's very different to anything any of us had done before.
For sure. I mean, from my perspective, 2022 is a bit of a weird year for me because I became a dad. But it felt to me like because I've been in and around the UK music scene for a while, but it felt like you kind of came out of nowhere, and then suddenly everyone knew who you were. That's kind of what it felt like, and I was very curious about how that happened, basically.
I mean, yeah, it's kind of the way it went. It's because I spent that couple of years to learn about the music industry and about how this stuff works, and I'm still learning all the time, but also because we had everything ready. It wasn't a case of let's launch the band and then do the stuff. It was let's launch the band. It was New Year's Day 2022. Facebook and Instagram and everything went public, and then the 4th of Jan that year, Guns for Hire came out, and then the 5th of Jan we announced the tour, and then a few weeks after that we had the second single, and so on. And when you do that sort of thing, it's very, very easy to attract attention of fans and of the industry, because everyone has that feeling of like, oh my God, where have these guys come from?
Clever. I like that. Yeah, no, I've never come across a band who have done it that way, and it's really worked for you. It clearly has. So that's really cool. I really like that, I've got to say. Kind of on the opposite scale, have you had any like nightmare experience gigs where everything's gone wrong?
Luckily, we've not had anything that's like absolutely horrible. To be honest, not really. I think the worst thing that we had was when we were in Germany last year. We did a little tour. We played 3 shows, and then we played a festival the next day, big festival, and we played in Filderstadt on the Friday night. And in Germany, they go till a little later, so we were on stage until like just gone midnight, and then you spend an hour and a half meeting all of the fans and selling merch and signing things and hanging out and stuff. So that takes you until about 1:30 in the morning, and then you've had a few drinks and stuff, so that affects the loadout speed. So then you get everything loaded out, and it's about 2:30. You get back to the hotel at 3, fall asleep by 3:30. We had to get up at 6, and we were on stage about 2 or 3 hours away at midday or 12 on the dot. So we were playing that show on like 2 hours sleep, in front of 2,000 people. and we didn't have any backup guitars on that tour, and Zach's string broke just before the guitar battle part of the set, so he had to run backstage and do the fastest guitar string change in the history of mankind, whilst Rhea, this is like her fourth show with us as a member of the band, had to improvise a solo for however long, a couple of minutes, in front of 2,000 people on 2 hours sleep. So that was probably the most seat of our pants moment that we've had. That could have all gone wrong very quickly.
I mean, that does sound a bit mad, but these things happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's like, we're out in Europe next month opening for UDO, and we got that because his manager saw us play at Keep It True, and when I emailed, he was like, "Yeah, like we can give you this support slot because I saw you at the festival and I thought you guys are great." And like in my mind, I'm like, "Really?" Like we look back on that gig and we were like, we were still good, but it wasn't, for us in our minds, it probably wasn't like the best show, just because we were so exhausted.
I mean, it is true to say that when it comes to kind of creative outputs, you're your own worst critic. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? There is always that. So moving over the kind of subject a little bit, how do you guys write songs as a band? Do you kind of come with ideas, or do you jam it together? How does that kind of thing come about?
So, I mean, it's constantly changing, because on the first record, when I started the band, it was never my plan to be a songwriter because I'd never done it before. And I was always intending to find someone that could be like the main songwriter for Tailgunner. And I'm very glad that it didn't work out that way. Basically, I thought, okay, I need to write something so I can show to people this is the sort of band that I want to do. And the first song that I ever wrote, the first proper song I ever wrote, was Shadows of War. That's why it's the opener for the album, and why I love Guns for Hire so much, because that was the second song that I wrote, and that was the one where I thought, okay, I can really do this. The first one wasn't a fluke. I can actually seem to write songs. And so the first album, a lot of it was written before anyone else joined the band. And then the pandemic happened, so I was kind of forced to do a lot of it by myself. And then for this album, it's a lot more collaborative. I'm still the primary songwriter, but the opportunity is there now to write with Craig and with Zach especially. The three of us have formed a really solid writing team, and it's bringing a whole new dynamic to the second record, which I'm very, very excited about. So, I mean, in terms of the writing, it's normally I'll have the idea that sparks everything off. Sometimes I'll write completely by myself. Sometimes I'll bounce ideas off the other guys, and it's very, very exciting because we may be on our second album, but in terms of co-writing, it's like a brand new thing to us. So it opens up so many possibilities.
I haven't really got a non-clunky way of saying this, but it's almost like your first album as a band, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it's true. Like the first record is certainly not like a solo album, and I wouldn't call it that. But in terms of the way it was written, it kind of is like that. This is the first album as a band. You're right.
Exciting! Can't wait to hear it. So, thinking about kind of your first album and things like that, how did you approach recording that? Did you record it yourselves, go into the studio? What was your approach to that kind of side of things?
We found down on the south coast in Bournemouth, there's an old Victorian chapel, which was on Airbnb, which you can rent. So because we had no money, this is like before the record deal or anything like that. So we had to find a way to do it cheap, and we had to learn our way around the law as well, because this is January 2021, so it's right in the middle of the pandemic. And yeah, basically we moved ourselves, like our beds and everything and all of the equipment, into this old chapel for a couple of weeks, and did it that way, which was amazing. Like, it's the dead of winter, and on the south coast, and God knows what people must have thought when they saw us lot turning up to this building with these Marshall cabs and all the rest of it. But it was great. Like we made the altar into like what the control room, I guess you could call it, and Craig's vocal booth was like makeshift out of old throws and cushions and anything that was lying around that could dampen the sound, and held up by tent pegs and things. And we'd record, up to 3 or 4 at night, and all candlelit and everything. So it was very atmospheric. It was really, really cool. And the whole thing was surrounded by a graveyard as well. So if you go out for a smoke in between takes or whatever, it was definitely like a very metal vibe.
Do you think that the atmosphere helped with the feel of the record as well?
Yeah, I think so. And I think just like staying there as well and sleeping in and amongst the gear, and like the whole way it was of like, if someone's busy tracking their parts, then someone else would be like cooking for them and like cooking for everyone else, and we'd all sort of like help each other out. So it was just a really, really cool like atmosphere to the whole thing, I
think it's a good, what you did there was kind of a good midway, I guess, between the studio and doing it at home, because obviously you've got the cost kind of element to it as well, but you've also got that that not being at home, not being in that kind of familiar environment is probably going to help you ultimately. I'm going to have to go back and listen to that record in a new light now I know how you did it. So what would you say has been the biggest success of the band so far? That might be a difficult question. It could be one particular moment, one particular thing, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few really. I mean, I think the fact that we got signed so quickly was really cool. And as well, like, the reason that I formed this band is because I went and saw Helloween's Pumpkins United tour. I became absolutely obsessed with Helloween in like late 2017. And to put Tailgunner out into the world and within 6 months be on the same label as Helloween, the reason that I even formed the band in the first place, I think that's massive for me, and very, very surreal. So that's really cool. I think something else that, we look back on a lot is being handpicked by KK Downing to open the first KK show. What an icon he is. So certainly meeting him and getting to open that show and getting advice from him, and he still stays in touch and things, on social media and everything, which is pretty cool to have that sort of backing behind us. And there's, stuff that we're really looking forward to, like going out to Europe. We've got a couple of European tours this spring, like I mentioned, with UDO and Riot, and then we'll be at Stone Dead and Bloodstock and a lot of big festivals. And, we've still only been going, 3 years as a band. So, yeah, there's a lot, to be fair, and we're obviously very happy at how it's going, but not so happy that we aren't going to continue to work even harder. Let's see how far we can take it.
Totally. Be interested to see how far you go, to be honest. How do you guys go about kind of managing the activities of the band? Is there one person who's like the boss, or do you share out tasks? How does that kind of thing work?
Yeah, I'm the boss.
So you are the man.
I'm the boss. Yeah, I'm the guy that's the slave driver with everyone else. Everyone works very, very hard, but I think it's certainly not a bad thing to have someone in charge in a band. And if you look at a lot of great bands, AC/DC was always Malcolm's band, Guns N' Roses is Axl, Iron Maiden is Steve. I think you have to have someone in the driver's seat.
How do you guys manage band finances? What is your approach to that side of things?
We have a band account, and the way that we do it is, so the first year we had to pay to do the band, and then the second year we broke even, and it was covering like touring costs basically. So no one had to pay out their own pocket to do photo shoots or stay in a hotel or get a plane here or whatever. We didn't have to pay to do the band. And then this year is like the same principle. There's no one's paying to do the band, and now we're at a point where when we're on tour, we cover like people's lost income and things, because if Craig is self-employed, he's a session musician. When he's on tour, he can't record, he can't do that work. So as well as covering the touring costs, we'll then say, okay, what's your bills for this month? And then same for a few of us. Basically we're all in different places in life and different places with jobs. Some of us are doing music for a living, some of us aren't, and it's about making sure that the band is sustainable financially for everyone. And if we're going to go out on the road for a month, people still have rents and mortgages and things to pay. So that's the way we do that. We don't take any money out in terms of paying ourselves. No one has a wage from it, because ultimately that's not something that we want to do just yet. We would like to keep growing and keep investing things back into the band so the production can get better. We can, buy new instruments and stage props and all the rest of it, up until the point where we have something, completely mind-blowing and where we want to be. And then I think if we do that for a few albums, then hopefully we'll arrive at a point where we can go, okay, now we can look into what can we do.
It must be amazing to have it pay for itself, because there's so many musicians that is an absolute pipe dream.
Yeah, we're very fortunate. We work very hard to get to that point, but I mean, as much as you work very, very hard on writing music, I mean, thank God people like what we do.
Yeah, if people didn't like it, it wouldn't get very far. So.
No, you wouldn't. No, but that's always the thing as well. It's, you could put something out, and even if you're absolutely convinced it's the best thing you've ever done, there's no guarantee that people will buy it. There never is. So, yeah, I think obviously we're still a very new band, and we are still a relatively small band, and still it just totally blows my mind every time someone buys a t-shirt and they're in Australia or Japan or LA or whatever. It's like, because it's like someone was speaking to me at the last night of the UK tour that we did in October, and they were saying like they've known about the band since the first single and watched it grow and watched it happen, and they said it must be so surreal for you guys. And it's like, I said to them, before Tailgunner, we've all been in local bands where you can pull a handful of people in your hometown, and if you play an hour down the road, no one comes. We've all been there and done that for years on end, and for this to be so different is, even for us, like in the eye of the storm, it's still completely mind-blowing, so we never take it for granted.
On a completely different note, what are your goals for the band in the next 6 months to a year or so?
Right now, we want to take the first album to as many people as possible, to as many countries as possible. I mean, thankfully for us, with the distribution and being on a big label and everything, the album is sold all around the world, and we want to go and play to all those people, And it's a bit tricky because it's growing so fast, and when you have people saying, oh, when are you going to come and play in America or Australia or whatever, and it's like, well, hang on, man, we've been going a couple of years. Most bands are still pretty local at this point, and so trying to keep up with the demand is quite difficult. But certainly, whilst the second album it's like 80-90% of the way there now, it's really come together. I'm in no rush to put it out because I feel like there's still so much that we can achieve off the back of Guns for Hire. So, I mean, the shows that we've got in the UK this year are our biggest yet. I mean, we're going to be at the Underworld in London, which I'm absolutely buzzing for. I can't wait for that.
I need to get a ticket.
Yeah, man, grab a ticket, because that's actually our fastest selling show to date as well. So that's, yeah, I think it's gonna be a sold out show. And just, yeah, like if we sell that out, then the next step up from that would be Electric Ballroom, So let's see how far we can push it on album one.
It's a good plan. Yeah, and I definitely need to get a ticket whilst I still can, because I got a ticket for your last tour, and then I was ill.
Yeah, I know.
Couldn't go. I was absolutely gutted.
Yeah,
Absolutely
that
gutted.
Blackheart show was fantastic, I must say.
Yeah, it's a good venue, it's Blackheart.
When that was on sale, I remember saying to my girlfriend, you know, I want to do the Underworld next. And at that point, I think we'd only sold a handful of tickets for the Blackheart, and she was like, you know, you have to sell out the Blackheart before you can do the Underworld. And it's like, yeah, you're right. And then as soon as we sold out the Blackheart, it was like, okay, Underworld's next.
next goal, fair enough. My penultimate question for you, this might be a hard question for you, what is your best piece of advice for bands nowadays?
Be really, really honest with yourself and don't compromise for anything, including yourself. What I mean by that is you have to have a very, very good objective view of what you're doing. It's a lot easier to be into your own music when you're the one creating it. And that's not to say that you should put yourself down or anything like that, but you have to be very, very honest with yourself and think, if you heard your band out of nowhere, would you really go crazy for it? And if you wouldn't, that's fine, but write some more songs, you know, and just be really, really brutal. And it's tough, you know, but that's the culture that we've developed within Tailgunner, is now like any little detail that is not 100%, we'll bring it up with one another. And that's not, everyone knows it's not a personal thing and no one's having a go or whatever. But if you want to really do this and take it to a high level, there's no room for anything like that. You know, you just have to be totally brutal with yourself, because that's how these bands that we all know and love and that are absolutely massive got to be massive, by not half-arsing it, basically. So that's what I mean. And when I say don't compromise, it really ties into that of like, if you think that, I don't know, that song that you wrote is not quite good enough, or that bass line that you wrote it does, but it's not like you could do better, then do better. You know, there's no rush to do this. Just don't compromise your art until, you know, it's absolutely where it needs to be.
I like it. Good. I was going to say rules for life. Good rules for music. Maybe for life too. Use your whole ass.
I mean, and the other side of that, yeah, use your whole ass. That's good. I like that. And the other side of that is, like, before we launched Tailgunner, I actually had like an A&R consultation with, there's one guy that is part of a big PR company in music, and another guy who I won't name, but he was on the first record that I ever bought, and had a number one album in a rock band and things, in the late 80s or early 90s or whatever, you know, successful guys. I had a chat with them and they said to me, this is, you know, I've sent them the demos for the first album and everything. And they said, this band is not as good as you think it is, and it will not achieve the things that you think it might. And what I would say to that with other people is, if you really, really believe 100% with all your heart in what you're doing, don't listen to people like that. Just go for it. If you really believe in what you're doing, then don't let anyone stop you, you know, because we've gone and proved those people wrong.
Boom. Boom. So, to close out the podcast, I'd like to ask you for your favourite song from the band that's been released so far to play at the end of the podcast. So, which song have you picked and why?
It's got to be Guns for Hire, because it's our calling card as a band. I wrote it in the spirit of Rock and Roll Outlaw by Rose Tattoo. You know, how that song is, it just sums up everything that band is about. That's what I wanted for Tailgunner, and Guns for Hire sums up everything we're about, you know. Like it says in the song, we'll stand with our backs to the wall, take on the world with heavy metal, and it's a banger.
Can't ask more than that. Cool. So this is Tailgunner with Guns for Hire. Tom, it's been really great to chat with you.
Thanks for having me on, dude.